the discussion about grief. While speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Think about it again. While speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. The wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. It's a really interesting question to probe that. Why don't the wise lament the living or the dead? You would think that there'd be, empathy, and you'd think there'd be compassion, and you think that they would feel all of that. And yet he's saying that true wisdom is a stage even beyond empathy, even beyond compassion.
It feels an awful lot like indifference, doesn't it?
It would look like indifference if it weren't from a place of wisdom.
Right?
Indifference is to not care, right? But to care and then to go beyond caring. Like if I know that I've left my kids in a safe place to play, and at the end of the day they'll come home, is that indifference or is that knowledge? I know I've put them in safe hands, people that I trust. At the end, they'll come back home. So I wouldn't think you'd call that indifference. It's a full awareness. I've done my research. I've done my homework. I know these are good people. I've known them for a while. So in the same way, the creator of all that is sends us here for a little while to get some experiences. And during that time, we enjoy, we suffer, we go through ups and downs, and we learn a few things, hopefully. And then we come back home for a while, little vacation, right? As kids do when they're in boarding school. And we come home for a bit, and then we go back again to school. And this is kind of that boarding school. And this is that situation. And the kids don't want to really go back to school, honestly. They're like, no, I like it at home. Yeah. Then they're told, no, you got to go back. And so when the wise, knowing that this is the flow of events, and they know that the soul is not actually affected by any of it, all the pain, the loss, the suffering, the disease, none of it really amounted to anything. I mean, Shakespeare said it beautifully when he said, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players or actors. They have their entrances and their exits. And when you look at it from that perspective, then you begin to understand why the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. See? Because there's a knowing that all of this is, I think of this sometimes as a Disneyland for souls, this place, this world, this creation. And in this Disneyland, we have so many adventures. And they're very real. They're very scary too. And they're very painful at times. They hurt like crazy at times. But that's the beauty of the adventure. Like a good movie, when a movie really grips you and it really gets you, like that's a good movie, right? Same here. And yet when you're in it, I mean, trust me, when you're in it, I know, knowing all of this, when you're in it, you laugh, you cry, you weep, it's horrible. And then you get back and you get back to your senses and you realize, that was an interesting experience I had. It's a matter of perspective, how you look at it. If you look at it from the inside as a human being, it's awful. This is a place of suffering. This is a place of torture. This is a place of so much misery. So on one hand, Krishna would describe this as a place of misery. Dukhalayam, he calls it. Dukhalayam, the land or the place of dukh or sadness and suffering. Ashashvatam, where everything is temporary, nothing lasts. And in this land, when we come here, we start to wonder why, what's going on. We don't stop to look at the real urges within us, our real craving, which is that we do not want to die. How come we don't want to die? Not even the cockroach wants to die. How come we do not want unhappiness? How come we do not want to get old? How come we do not want to get sick? Is it the scientists who tell you it's just a survival instinct? Okay, yeah, it's a possibility. What if it was more than that? What if it is that dying is unnatural for us? Getting old is unnatural for us. Becoming sick is unnatural. Because the soul, it doesn't know what this thing is. This is ridiculous. It doesn't fit. it never gets old. The real you never gets old, never dies, never gets sick, never suffers. So we're coming here to experience something that we cannot experience where we came from. We get to experience the opposite of that. In that confusion inside us, the longing on one hand to live forever and be happy and enjoy and have lots of love, that's the longing in us. And in this world, when we try to do it, we find ourselves falling flat on our face. We find ourselves not able to get what we want. We don't get the love we want. We don't get the happiness we want. We don't get the fulfillment we want of whatever. And we wonder why. That why is so important. That why will take us to understanding why we're here and what this is all about. So keep asking why. Why the suffering? Buddha asked, why is there so much suffering in this world? That led him to nirvana, to the Bodhi tree, that led him to his meditations, and that led him to, in his liberation and to the teachings that he brought to the world. Arjun asked why, and that led him to listening to Krishna speaking the entire Bhagavad Gita to him. So never stop asking why. And keep listening. But the difference is these people acted on, they heard. They questioned, and then they took the things they heard and they learned and put them into their life. That's the key thing. Does that make any sense about grieving? We do. It's very real, the grief. Mm-hmm. And yet we can step back and we can look at it and we can understand that this part of me, this human part of me feels loss. This human part of me feels a sense of attachment, a connection, a sense of, I will never see that person again. My father, I will never see him again. This is true. And yet I also know that life after life we will meet. And that, as Shakespeare said, parting is sweet sorrow, meaning that we will meet again and again and again. But in that moment of parting, it is sweet sorrow. Sweetness because we know we shall meet again. Sorrow because in this life we will not meet any further. So there's these mixed emotions. And when seen from that part, you begin to understand how the human and the soul coexist with each other. We have to leave room for both. The human has to feel its feelings and have its experience. But if we simply stay at that level, then the counterbalance doesn't take place and we become swept away by the emotions of grief and loss. But having both these in place creates a counterbalancing effect. I was talking to someone recently about how this idea of being in the world but not of the world, learning to balance these two realities that we live in, the spiritual reality and the human reality. And both are full and complete in themselves. They are two complete realities. The human reality is complete in itself. Don't tell a human that you will not die, you will not get sick, you will not get, or you do not hurt, it's not paining, it's not, it's not sad. When they're in their humanness, that's complete. It needs to be honored for what it is. But if they only have that, then it's a very difficult journey to do. That's why we need the other side to balance it out. Balance it out does not mean negate the human experience. It simply means to go back and forth. It means to look at this for a while and look at this for a while. Have the human experience of enjoying the material things of the world, and then step away from it and go into your soul and know that all of that was just a game. We were just playing like kids on a playground. None of it mattered. In any case, if you think about it, everything that is happening to you today or yesterday or 10 years ago, where does it live? Like even a minute ago, where does it live? The way time passes, then the time that has passed, where is it? Only in your memory. Otherwise, it's gone. Doesn't exist. And if we try to hold on to it through our memory, then we suffer. All suffering actually comes from that. It comes, and when you have no memory of anything, there is no suffering of anything either.
You just helped me understand the point of Alzheimer's. Right?
I think people get so saturated with the suffering of their life that it's best to forget. So they go into Alzheimer's. I've often seen this with people who have a partner who often it's a, well, I hate to say this in any kind of generalized way, but I've seen this a few times, so nothing statistical here. But men who had wives who were very loud and very bossy and who lost their hearing really fast, so they just tuned them out. I think the body has its own magic that it does. Because they're in relationships where they would just not leave, they would just stay on, but they had to find a way to survive and cope. So, but Alzheimer's might be very much a product, a disease just like that. Causes us to cope with the pain of memories of this life. And what are memories? Just pieces of data stored in our head. They're gone. There's nothing left there. It's a dream. Shakespeare again, if I can bring him back in the scene, he says, "'Tis a tale full of sound and fury, signifying nothing." We think all of this means something. Not really. The story doesn't matter. The events actually do not matter. What you took away from there, that matters. It's like if there was an oyster and then you took out the pearl from the oyster. That pearl you'll hold on to. You'll not think of, very rarely will somebody think about the oyster from which the pearl came, or the dirt from which the diamond came. But they're fascinated with the diamond. Much the same way we want to have um, the wisdom that was gained through the experience. That matters. Not the But as human beings, we hold on to the experience. We hold on to the story. We keep narrating the story. And we keep finding audiences for that story, and we love each other's stories, and the stories are so important. uh, but for the soul, there's no memory. There's just the piece that's clicked and snapped into place, that piece of wisdom, that learning, that understanding that now has clicked into place, and from here on your life changes. You see things differently, you do things differently, you live differently. That piece which you took away, that matters. Everything I say is just words, it doesn't matter. But if you can take one piece out of this, and if that one piece does something to your life, yeah, all of it, all these millions of words will have found their target. You'll forget everything I said, but you'll remember that one piece that stuck out. So always be looking out for that nugget, that piece of gold, that nugget of wisdom that clicks for you. And then act on it. Welcome, Priya, Mariah, and Craig.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, good to have you guys back. So what's been happening? What is anyone living with? Any questions on what we're talking about? We're discussing grief.
Rohit, I'm sorry I was late to the call, but was grief relevant to the Bhagavad Gita, or did it just kind of come up?
It came up because Rima raised the question about how I was doing with my father's death and with the grief of that, and how difficult grief can be, and she was empathizing. We started discussing grief, and that linked up to the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna starts off talking about how the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. And then we went on to discuss why they do not lament either for the living or the dead. And then the importance that we place on our stories, and the importance that we place on this body, and how all of it is. I mean, and so the point is that then she brought up the point of indifference. Is it not indifference? And I said, no, it's not indifference. When there's wisdom, it's not indifference. Indifference is to ignore something. But when there's knowledge and you can see the big picture, then it isn't indifference anymore. Now you realize the plan, you understand the grand scheme of things, you understand what happens as the soul leaves the body and where it goes and how it comes back. And how this is like a boarding school where kids come here for the year, go back home when the year is over, they come back again. So when you see it from that perspective, there's nothing to grieve.
It's interesting because I was just talking about grief with my partner, and how grief can hide inside.
Yeah.
And it can be in your muscles, and it's such a deep emotion that needs to be dealt with.
Absolutely. So that was the other thing we were talking about, is that the human experience is the human experience. It is a whole and complete experience in and of itself, and it cannot be negated. And it must be taken for what it is. And yet it is not the entire picture. So go into it, feel that grief, feel that experience, right? Learn the tools with which to address that. But at the same time, have this balance where you can come back later on, not in that moment, but when you're done with dealing with it, when you're done with really acknowledging it, feeling it, being there with it, empathizing with it. When that feels complete, come back. Come back to your real self and create the balance within you of the human and the divine. Because that balance ultimately is what will help you navigate this world in a healthier way. If we're simply going from one story to another, one high and one low to another, then there is no balance. There is just the bobbing up and down of the waves of the ocean of this world. The balance is where we go through that experience and then we come into ourself, come into that place of calmness, homeostasis, of feeling a sense of balance again, and go back into the world and experience what the world has to offer. But now what happens is you will see the world differently and experience it differently with each wave, with each up and down, you will experience it differently. Until there comes a point where the waves become ripples and not huge waves anymore. They do not toss and throw you off as much as they did earlier. They become more like ripples on a lake. And while you feel them, they don't throw you over like tidal waves and tsunamis do. But that was good, Mariah. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything more you want to say about that with grief?
That business about ripples rather than tidal waves, that's another way of saying equanimity, right?
Yes, absolutely. Although sometimes because of the word equanimity, we sometimes think in absolutes. And I feel that a more balanced approach is to know that we'll still get affected to some degree. At the same time, what Mariah says is very important. Be careful that your emotions, be they grief or anything else, are not hiding in places where you've shoved them down or into little pockets here and there. If they're there, then let them come up and be heard and seen and felt and acknowledged and loved and then released. So we neither need to make them into monuments or treasures, nor do we need to turn them into ugly little things that we throw into the closet or under the bed. Neither extreme is needed, right? They just need to be dealt with appropriately. How do you deal with your emotions? It's an open question for anyone.
I've learned just to be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of sit with it and just, like easier with other people when somebody's angry, instead of reacting to them, I'm like, okay, they're angry. That's it. And just leave it at that.
Right.
With myself is pretty much, I try to apply the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just acknowledge it.
So you label the emotion. I'm angry. I'm feeling anger. Okay. And you watch it and you observe it. Yes. And then notice where it is and what it's doing in your body and how it's moving through you. And the more you can witness it, the more you can watch it. Now, the thing is, you can watch it and be completely dispassionate or indifferent, or you can watch it and you can be very compassionate with it. Okay. Or empathetic with it, actually. Because compassion, somewhere, as I've begun to learn, requires some action. It's not that you need to do something necessarily. It needs that you resonate with it for a little while. You provide it the empathy for what it's feeling, and that allows it to settle. Because there's a different language that emotions have and that logic has, and there's a different language that the soul has. The language of logic, as you know, is to think. And a lot of folks go there, that's like their go-to place. So even if they're feeling an emotion, they'll go to logic. They'll start thinking, well, why did this happen? What does this mean? How could this be? And they'll start trying to rationalize
Yeah.
emotion. And that only agitates the emotion and makes it worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't help in any way. Emotions follow a different language, and one has to speak to them in their own language.
Mm-hmm.
And that language is the language of empathy. That language is the place of compassion. It's the place of kindness. It requires, soothing.
So it's another emotion, an emotion.
Yes. So emotions have to be met with an emotional response.
Okay.
Logic has to be met with a logical response. Okay. So that's what I mean by a language. When the language of logic is happening, you meet it with the language of logic. When the emotion is happening, you meet it with the language of emotion.
That's interesting.
Right? Yeah. You got to come to its frequency. It's like when you play with a child, you come to the level of the child and you relate to them as a child. Can't always be a parent. You have to, from time to time, you have to come and relate to them as a child, because that's when you relate. Otherwise, you're not relating. A
It's
lot of people who
interesting.
become parents don't relate with their children because they don't go to the level of that child.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the ways I got to that point was I started fasting. I just lost like 5 pounds. I'm trying to lose about another 5
Good.
pounds more.
Congratulations.
Anyway, but I would get hungry, and instead of reacting to the hunger, I learned to let the hunger kind of pass.
Mm,
And I learned that, okay, I'm just going to sit with the hunger and just be aware of it. And I kind of applied that to emotions too. That kind of taught me that.
Very nice, actually. Yes. Yes,
Hunger.
if you can sit with the emotions and be with them and just say, I'm feeling sad, and then sit with it.
Mhm.
It's like sitting with your friend who's sad and just holding their hand and being there with them. It's not like you have to say much even, but just the fact that you're there and you're setting up what you're doing is setting up a resonance, but you're not doing anything. You're just setting up a resonance. Means think of two of the prongs of a tuning fork, and when you hit that, they start resonating with each other, to the two prongs, and they set up a resonant sound. It's the same way with emotion. You can sit with someone and just be present to them, and that sets up a resonance. So
It's
you
so
don't even
true.
need words. You can use words of empathy. You can sit in silence and do it the way you did, which is also great. Or you can use touch and hold yourself in the place where you're feeling that sadness, whichever works better for you. But experiment with all of them. And maybe you want a combination of all three.
Yeah,
Or
it's so
one.
true. Most of the pain comes from the thinking about it
Absolutely.
and all the.
But here's what you do. When you first have an emotion, deal with the emotion at the emotional level.
Yeah.
Then come back out to the thought that led to the emotion, and then break that thought, because 9 out of 10 times that thought had some flaws in it. There was some missing piece of information. There was an upset, and you thought it was because this person was maybe trying to use you or trying to do this or that. And then you go and you talk to them and you find out what's the truth behind the matter. You have to sometimes be a bit of a detective. And then you find out what really happened, and they'll tell you what really happened. And you'll realize your mind made up a whole story trying to fill in the blanks of what it didn't know.
We
And
delete.
now it's starting to feel used, starting to feel taken advantage of, whatever the story might be, right? You'll find 9 out of 10 times it was just a story that led to the emotional response. So it's always good to get the facts clear by talking to the other person. You say, well, the other person might be bullshitting me. Okay, possible. But which is better for you, to clear it up and be done with it, or to keep on, mulling over it? How does that help you? Okay, even if they made up something just to pacify you, so what? The bottom line is you got free of the turmoil in your head. That matters.
That's all that matters to
Right.
me. My view.
Yeah, and you can get on with your life.
Yeah.
And the language of the soul is very different. The language of the soul is heard in silence, and it is heard when your mind is what that means when your mind is quiet. It's not about an external environment that is silent, but it's an internally quiet environment.
Mm-hmm.
And it is heard when you truly pay attention, because it's very quiet. It's very soft. It's very gentle. It's usually the first thing that'll come to mind. And if you're not paying attention, it'll go and then the mind will come in. But you pay attention, it's right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why most of the time when people, even you're hearing anything I'm saying here, you probably already know it. You've heard it before. The question was, were you paying attention when you were hearing those words inside you? If you were, then you already know what I'm saying. But otherwise, it will be like a remembering of something that you heard but didn't pay attention to.
Yeah, I like that. That's so the soul has its own language in
Yeah.
addition to the emotion and the logic.
And it's its own frequency at which it vibrates, because when you hear this language of the soul, it is always uplifting. Just as the emotion creates its own turmoil and chaos, and the logic has its own processing, the language of the soul has this beautiful, uplifting fragrance or aura or whatever, however you want to put it. These are just words. What it does is it suddenly lightens your load. You begin to feel free of whatever you were carrying. And it's like you put your burdens down, you suddenly feel uplifted. So there's a certain feeling that accompanies listening to the soul, or even being in its presence.
cool.
Mm. All right, we left off at the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 18. Let's continue from there. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. It's a very powerful verse. And it talks about, the first thing it talks about is humility, the humble sage by virtue of true knowledge. So that knowledge, which does not produce humility, is wasted knowledge, is useless knowledge, is just information. Okay? And all it does is it creates a burden on your head that you are somehow great because of what you know. But that knowledge which produces humility strikes at the core of wisdom. You see, intelligent people have a very high opinion of themselves, and the world looks up to them. They're so intelligent, they're so brilliant, they're so accomplished. I got a PhD, got so much. They know so many facts, they know so many figures. But a wise person may not know any facts or figures. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. A wise person has humility. That humility is the doorway to emptiness. Emptiness is the doorway to wisdom, because into emptiness comes the wisdom of the universe. Into that place of not knowing comes the wisdom of the universe. And the key to entering that door is humility. How do you get humility? It's when you take the knowledge that you've got and you use that to understand how little you know. Use that to understand how insignificant you are, and how no matter how much you may be admired or appreciated or valued by people, you are lower than the straw in the street, as Chaitanya would say. He was a great scholar, a great devotee of Krishna, a lover of God, and to cry in ecstasy in his love for the divine. He would say this: I am lower than the straw in the street. I am not I am so It's just this feeling of being nothing. Now, you'll hear about this from many spiritual teachers, the importance of nothingness. But the way to get there is humility. And so the humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision. You see what that humility does, that true humility, not a fake. You can have a fake humility. Oh, I'm just this, I'm the lowest of the low. I'm so low, man. I'm just like the coolest solo person, right? Right? So you could do a whole fake narcissistic humility, but there's no one, there's no one more humble than me. I'm the most humble of the humble, right? So that would be totally fake, pseudo narcissistic attempt. The one who has true humility, and in that humility is able to call out to the divine, to God, to connect with that, that person is endowed with equal vision or equanimity. And that equanimity, he sees, these are the symptoms. He sees a learned and gentle Brahmin. A Brahmin is a priest or a learned person, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. And this is considered an outcast, a really horrible person who is going to eat dogs. Like, come on, that has really got to be the lowest of the low human beings. But he sees them all as the same. That's the level of equanimity that one is able to get through the soul. You cannot get it through your mind, because your mind will look at all these different gradations of people, the saint and the sinner, if I just want to keep it, simple, and it will judge. And it cannot look at people as the same. And so you will find yourself struggling, and you will say, well, it might say these fancy words, but there's no way to get there. Yes, there is a way. There is a way, and that way is humility. Deep cultivating of humility. And then this equal vision, this equanimity is arrived at. Those whose minds are established in sameness or equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and they are already situated in Brahman. So Brahman is the energy of the universe, the energy of the divine, the energy of God that is present all over the universe. It is in every atom of the creation. It is the energy of which everything is made. Okay, this world, very, very often people divide it into material and spiritual. They think there is a spiritual world out there and there is a material world out here. This is a gross illusion. This is a complete lie. The spiritual world is right here. In every atom of the creation lies Brahman. That is spirit. That is the spiritual world right here and now. It is not just out there. It is out there, yes. There is a realm called the light where it exists in its pure form. Here it comes and it shapes into different forms, and trees and houses and cars and people and all kinds of things. But those forms are only forms, and behind those forms is Brahman. You can feel this presence in nature very easily. You can feel this presence in yourself when you meditate very easily. It's very hard to do with man-made objects like a phone or a computer or a table or a chair. But in living beings, you will feel it easily. In living nature, you will feel it easily. That life force that is present there will help facilitate being able to feel it. So Brahman, which is everywhere, they have become one with that. They have become flawless, it says here, like Brahman. So Brahman is flawless. Very big, interesting word choice of words here. Brahman is flawless. The divine is flawless. Your soul is flawless. God is flawless. But the world is full of flaws. Your human nature is full of flaws. Your body, your mind, your ego is full of flaws. So we're, yeah, and it's so interesting that the mind, which is full of flaws, judges itself for being full of flaws. It's bizarre. It is the thing that is flawed, and it is judging itself for being flawed. But the aspect of us that is flawed, our humanness, will never become perfect. No matter how much you judge yourself or criticize yourself, no matter how much you improve yourself or you keep on you're trying to better yourself through classes and workshops and what have you, that which is flawed, the human part of you, will never be perfect. And that which is perfect, your soul, which is of the same quality as Brahman, that which is perfect will never be flawed. It is eternally flawless. So we are a flawless being living in a flawed body, mind, spirit, body, mind organism in a world that is full of all kinds of flaws. It is beautiful, yet flawed. Flawed because in it exists birth, death, old age, and disease. Flawed because in it are tidal waves and storms and so many things, right? And we ourselves are flawed because we have a mind and the mind makes stuff up and we suffer.
So what is the point, Rohit? You were saying earlier that we need to come to this place because we have experiences we can't have in the realm of the perfect, right? But what is the point of having these experiences if we are already perfect?
Yes. So we are perfection perfecting itself. Let me explain. We think of perfection as an endpoint, but that is not true. Perfection is an ongoing journey. We are already, but the beauty is this: as a soul, you are already a perfect being, an enlightened being. You are filled with wisdom. As a soul, you are coming here to deepen that which you are, to become aware of that which you are, and then to deepen that experience. I've recently been putting together something for my group, and I think I can share this with you as a little preview of the kind of stuff we do.
Piggyback off of Rima's question there too. Something I may have heard just little things about, but really know nothing is it Vedic knowledge that has like the idea of the universe exists in these lokas, and we're here, this planet Earth is a certain loka, and you like ascend through these various other lokas, and
Yes.
so I know nothing about this other than like there's this idea, right? So it's kind of like what you were saying. Our purposes also fills into where we're at in this idea.
So the lokas you're talking about, Brahmalok, Satyalok, there's different planets. They are basically different planets within the universe. Okay, higher planets and lower planets. The Earth is considered to be in the middle. In the higher planetary systems, according to the Vedas, there is immense pleasure and wonderful things to enjoy. In the lower planetary systems, there is much suffering. And on the earth, there is an equal amount of suffering and joy and pleasure. But it says, where Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that whether one goes to the highest planet or to the lowest planet, all of them are places of suffering wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who returns to my abode never comes back to this temporary and miserable world. So we're asking the question, why do we incarnate? And so let me pose this question to you at an even deeper level. I'm going to share with you something that I'm doing in my group, and here it is. So we ask the question, why would the higher power or God place beings of light into a restricted physical world? Why would eternal beings be put into perishable bodies? Why would eternally youthful beings be subject to old age? Why would blissful beings be subjected to suffering? Was it to punish us? Was it to test us? Was it to help us? Was it to teach us? We can speculate and wonder based on a lifelong inquiry. Based on a lifelong inquiry, I have come to understand that the one reason we incarnate to understand is to understand authentic love. Love for ourselves, love for creation, and love for God. Love cannot be forced, demanded, expected. Love cannot be born in fear and obedience. Love must be free to choose, free to reject, deny, or even hate, free to do anything, be anything, create anything. This world was created like a Disneyland for souls where you had complete freedom to have, do, and be anything. And deal with the consequences, survival, deal with the mind, and deal with the emotions. So you come to this world. In this amazing adventure spanning millions of years, we enjoy and suffer, we live and die, we have and lose. One day it all begins to feel empty and useless. We begin to inquire, why am I here? What does all this mean? Who am I? Who is God? And then we begin the journey. To love something or someone, you must know about it. Love begins with you. If you do not love you, then you cannot really love anything or anyone. You will not know what real love looks like or feels like. You will not know how to give or receive love. Love yourself, you must know yourself. Who am I? You must peel through the layers of mind and body and discern the real, authentic, eternal you. When you have found the real you, you will also find it everywhere and in everyone. You will find yourself everywhere. That will be your first contact with Source or God. From there, you will begin the journey to know and love God. Your search for eternal love has found its target. You will go deeper and deeper into love. Love beyond conditions, love beyond reasons, love beyond people, love beyond time. Causeless love, endless love, infinite love. And then we go into the soul lessons that are to be learned. It's too much. This is part of my course. So if you're interested in that, you're welcome to join the next batch. But we talk about the soul lessons being these 10. Well, I have actually a picture where I break it up. The 10 soul lessons. The first is you learn about choice in this world. Then you learn acceptance, non-attachment, humility, compassion, trust, fearlessness, truth, non-duality, and finally unconditional love. These, to me, at this moment in time, as I can put it together, are the 10 soul lessons that we come here to learn. They're a powerful combination, and they all come together through the experiences we're having in this world. So every one of those experiences is extremely meaningful. Every pain you've had, every suffering you've had has been a wake-up call. Every one of those was leading you the way back to yourself. And if you were to find yourself and truly find yourself, you would find the suffering starts to come down. The fever, the temperature, the illness that you were suffering from in this world starts to come down. And you begin to experience life in a whole different way. That is the place I would love to see people come to, a place of mastery, where you're no longer suffering, where you understand how this body-mind organism works, and you understand how to live here. So that, to me, is what is the invitation of this world. It's not just to get out of here. It's to be here as a master of creation, to be here in a way that is an inspiration to others, that there is a better way to live your life. And that better way is not about just going out and working and surviving or accumulating, whatever it is. It's about learning how to live with a deep level of trust in the universe, a deep level of love for everything and everyone. It's that. And we can do this. It takes some work, it takes some time, it takes some learning. But it can be done. And if you want to know the lesson from the most important thing we learned just in reading the Bhagavad Gita today was that it takes humility. So he says here that those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. You see now how this all comes together? When you have come to that place of equanimity, you have conquered the conditions of birth and death. Means you will no longer, either you will no longer go through the cycle of birth and death, or the cycle of birth and death will no longer bother you. Either way, you're free. Right? And what does it take to get there? Humility. I would say that is the number one thing that it takes. And there are a bunch of other things to learn along the way, but humility opens the doorway to really learning and really changing. People who think they know have no humility, as a result of which they do not learn and they do not do, and nothing happens in their life because they already know. Where does humility start and where does it end? Humility has to be there always, no matter how much I know or anybody else knows. If they don't have humility, they've lost it. The moment you think you've arrived, the moment you think you're enlightened, the moment you think you know, you've lost it. So always stay as a student, always stay as a beginner, always stay as a learner. That was the message I got from my grandfather. He named himself Vidyarthi, which meant an eternal student. And I take after that as an eternal student, constantly staying in that place of not knowing, constantly ready to hear what others have to say and learn from others. Today I might sit here acting as if I know something. I know in my heart of hearts, I don't know anything. That is the truth. And there will always be people who know so much more, and that knowing has never helped. It is not knowing that has helped. It is surrendering that has helped. It is knowing that I am nothing that has helped.
Good shit.
Mariah, did you say something?
I was just talking about how good this is.
Oh,
I didn't know I was unmuted.
yeah. Any questions? Any last things? Because it's 8 o'clock and we're going to wind up. Rima, Craig, Ryan, any
No,
last thoughts? Anything that impacted you? Anything that struck you? Any nuggets of gold that you might be taking away?
Yeah, I like the humility thing.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. The humility really hit home.
Yeah. Take that. That is beautiful. That is a beautiful piece. When that humility brings you to the deepest level in that is to go, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into that. It will bring you to tears. It will bring you to a place of, the very thing that human beings fear the most, to know that you are worthless, to know that you are insignificant, to know that you amount to nothing. That is humility. And that is the doorway to spirit. But we avoid it. We avoided thinking, oh my God, because the ego cannot handle that. The ego, when it is confronted with that feeling, I mean, as a therapist, I have people come all the time. And the bottom line, as we dig deep into their issues, is this feeling, I'm not good enough. Something is wrong with me. I'm worthless. And I tell you, you are. Absolutely. Face it. It is the reality. It is the truth. Do not be ashamed of it. Embrace it. Because in that insignificance, in that is humility. And in that humility is the entrance to the soul and to God. When that humility brings you to tears, it will break open your ego. When it breaks open your ego, you will enter into the divine. So let that humility, moments will come in your life where you start to feel your powerlessness. You will feel like nothing I do works. You will feel yourself having no control in life. You will find yourself unable to manage or cope or whatever it is that you're struggling with. That moment where you feel like crap is the moment of humility. You don't have to wait for something bad to happen. You can just remember the times where you were there. You can go back to that and you can capture those feelings when you felt that way. And then use those feelings to take you deeper into that place of humility, to the point where you feel that worthlessness, and then call out to the divine, call out to God, saying, I am yours and you are mine. Reach out. Reach out, because there you will find your soul, and there you will find the oneness and the connection with God, and therein you will find that love of God, and you will find the greatest ecstasy of all. Let it crack you open. Let life crack you open. There's so much power in that. The ego hates it. The ego will not be able to handle this. So that's why please meditate first. Please build up some spiritual energy first. Then do this kind of work, because then you will have a balancing force. You will have your soul's energy to hold the fragile ego and say, my dear, we're going to be all right. You're not going to be devastated. And even though we're recognizing the truth of who we are, you're going to be fine, my loved one. You're going to be beautiful. You're beautiful as you are. In all your flaws, you are beautiful. And I love you, and I will be here with you, and you do not need to worry. That is where the magic is. All right, guys, I better end here. I will see you next week. And thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Rohit.
being here. Thank you so much for being here. I love you all.
Thank you, Rohit.
Take care.